Some stories become so famous that we stop asking questions about them. The Titanic is probably one of these stories. Everyone remembers the iceberg. Everyone remembers the ship sinking. But there's a detail that's easy to overlook. Before the collision, the Titanic received several iceberg warnings from other ships in the area. They weren't hidden. They weren't discovered years later. They were received that same day. Yet the ship continued through the North Atlantic at nearly full speed. A few hours later, it struck an iceberg. More than 1,500 people lost their lives. Looking back, it's tempting to ask, why didn't they just slow down? But hindsight is generous. It gives us information they didn't have. So maybe that's not the most interesting question. The most interesting one is, what has to happen inside someone's thinking for multiple warnings to feel less important than actually are? The easy explanation is overconfidence, but that word has always felt a little misleading. It makes it sound like people were arrogant or convinced nothing could happen. That's probably not how it felt at the time. Something much more ordinary was happening. Think about how confidence actually grows. It doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates. One successful voyage, then another, one decision that works, then another. Eventually your brain starts recognizing a pattern. We've seen this before. That's one of the brain's greatest strengths. Recognizing patterns saves time. Without it, every decision would feel like the first one. The problem is the brain doesn't only recognize patterns, it also starts filtering information that doesn't fit them. That's where things get interesting. Once you've convinced yourself that something is safe, every warning has to fight against that belief. Not because you are ignoring the warning, because your brain has already decided how important it probably is. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. We naturally give more weight to information that supports what we already believe, and less weight to information that challenges it. Pair that with years of successful voyages, and something subtle begins to happen. Every safe crossing becomes another piece of evidence that reinforces the same conclusion. We are safe. Then something changes. Not the belief, reality. And that's what makes this pattern so dangerous. The belief usually isn't updated, until reality forces it to be. What's interesting is that pattern doesn't stay on ships. It quietly follows people everywhere. One successful investment becomes confidence. 10 successful investments become certainty. Somewhere along the way, the question changes. It stops being, is this still a good decision? And becomes, why wouldn't it be? That's a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Because certainty doesn't only change when we believe, it changes what we bother looking for. Once the brain feels it has figured something out, it starts conserving effort. It checks less, questions less, doubts less. Most of the time, that's exactly what makes us efficient. Imagine questioning every traffic light, every email, every conversation. We'd never get anything done. The brain is constantly asking, can I stop paying attention to this yet? Usually that's a brilliant strategy. Until the world changes. And our attention doesn't. That's why experienced pilots still use checklists. Not because they know less than the new pilots, because they understand something experience can quietly take away. Fresh eyes. The same idea shows up in medicine. Some of the most experienced surgeons still follow routines they have performed thousands of times. Not because they don't trust themselves, because they know memory slowly replaces observation. That's a trait worth noticing. Experience gives us speed, but speed always tries to borrow from attention. Maybe the goal isn't to avoid confidence. Confidence is useful. The real challenge is finding small ways to interrupt it. A checklist, a second opinion, someone willing to ask, what if we are missing something? It's interesting. The smartest systems humans have built don't assume people won't make mistakes. They assume they will. Then they build habits that catch those mistakes before reality does. Maybe the Titanic isn't only a story about a ship. Maybe it's a story about what success quietly does to our attention. The more often something works, the easier it becomes to believe it will keep working. That's an easy pattern to miss, until it isn't. See you in the next one.